So KICKO began a little over 28 years ago now to really reach the kids in East Knoxville and the surrounding downtown communities in a way that we didn't see that being done at that time. So our initiative was very mobile, going into neighborhoods, and actually my parents started it. So I grew up watching KICKO grow up as a sibling as well, but they really, growing up in East Knoxville, had a heart for the neighborhoods just down the street from where we lived, and wanted to help kind of mobilize hope and help kids kind of overcome some of the obstacles they were facing and see them really kind of flourish and become everything that they were created to be. And so that's why it began. That was, again, almost 30 years ago, when having a nonprofit in the inner city wasn't the sexy thing to do, and there weren't quite as many as there are today. But we've still stayed true to the mission to help kids just kind of overcome those hurdles and continue to flourish and grow and be who they were created to be. Yeah, so our programs start when kids are young enough to even walk with an older sibling. They'll come into our neighborhood initiatives for elementary age programming, which is called Sidewalk. We're currently in 16 different neighborhoods running our Sidewalk program, and what happens is a staff member or volunteers along with that staff member will go into that community and literally visit every kid, whether it's door to door, club to club, however that community is made up. So that's the relationship component, where we're able to really kind of have ongoing, deepening relationships with families and in communities. And that's with about 1,300 kids over the 16 different communities every single week. But then our program comes in a day or two after that visitation. After going door to door and inviting them, our program will come in and it's high energy, singing songs, playing games, just having a ton of fun with the kids. We want it to be the most exciting time of their week. And then teaching a faith-infused, value-based curriculum that we believe will help the kids make better choices and hopefully see a brighter future. So that's the one that we operate with our elementary age kiddos. That's Sidewalk, but then we walk with them as they get older. In middle school and high school, those are crucial years to help them continue just to make good choices for great outcomes. And so that's what we call our youth. It used to be junior staff when they would get into 5th grade and they could help run Sidewalk in their own neighborhoods, and they still do. But then we realized they need something for themselves as well. And so that group gathers from all the different communities that we serve, and they come together every week and have a family style meal together, which is a lot of fun, because in the 90s, there was a lot of turf war for some of the different communities we were serving. And we were seeing even some of the gang activity that was kind of being broken down because they just didn't have experience with one another, didn't have relationship. But being able to see that really kind of grow over the years into our youth initiative, where those high schoolers now that grow up in that program are actually the ones that we're hiring, we're training, and they're running the elementary program throughout our summer. So this will be our second cohort that will go through what we call our emerging leaders. We're ones that have grown up as little kids coming to Sidewalk, have gone through the middle school and high school program, but are being brought in high school and learning how to interview, learning how to write a resume, applying for a position, and then given opportunity just to come back as a leader in their own neighborhood. So that's been pretty neat to see that kind of come full circle. And then alongside working with just students in general, we realize, man, when we bring them back home from summer camp or a big conference that we've taken them to out of town, there's oftentimes the sense of deflation as you're bringing them back into the neighborhood. They're just not excited. And we started recognizing, you know what, we really need to provide more supports for a sustainable environment at home for the work that we're doing with the young people. And so this is where we started our family initiatives, and we run a 13-week curriculum 3 times a year. And it's our parent-to-parent, where they get to come together and really just share their life experience, things that are working well, things that are hard. But then our curriculum, Raising Highly Capable Kids out of Colorado Springs, has really been a springboard for a lot of these families to not only walk away with social equity, but with some tools in their belt to know how to raise kids that are just trying to not only just get through and get by, but really just help them thrive. And so that's been really fun to kind of step into that family piece as well and provide support. And then just a couple years ago, in partnership with our Boys and Girls Clubs here in the East Tennessee Valley, along with the Sheriff's Office, we stepped into a partnership with those 2 organizations to provide what we call community chaplains. The Boys and Girls Club came to us as their faith-based partner and said, hey, how could we provide chaplains to our staff, to our kids, to their families? And so we've been able to take them through some very robust training to be able to respond to some of really life's kind of most challenging moments, loss of loved ones, some of the things that we see on the news that affect families. Are really what those chaplains are able to go in and be spiritual paramedics and provide care in a unique way. So that's kind of the 4 different programs that we operate regularly. Yeah, you know, I think this is one thing that organizations have to continue to evaluate. While your mission doesn't change, your methods certainly have to. You know, the competing elements that we're up against with young people, very, very different. You know, technology alone has changed the landscape. And so we're continually looking at how do we not reinvent the wheel, but creatively make it a program that is appealing to kids. And so constantly having to nuance what we do. While we may have a form and a model, it's constantly being tweaked. And I think our parenting program is really kind of a case in point of how we recognize need and addressed it for our families. While we may be a youth-serving organization, serving whole families really betters our mission to serve youth. And so being able to provide family supports, just because we see that as something that is not being done in our community by and large, was something that we were willing to pivot and say, hey, this is something that helps our overall objectives, to help youth overcome obstacles. And a lot of that is generational. A lot of that is just, you don't know what you don't know. And so walking together with families has been a unique opportunity to kind of not only pivot and address some of those needs and gaps, but also to create opportunity for them to succeed and do it together. COVID was not our favorite year. 2020 was tough for a lot of organizations, and like most, you know, we weren't able to do a lot of our face-to-face programming in April and May of that year. But you're right, we're very much a one-on-one organization, and so as soon as June 1 opened up, we felt like, hey, you know what, let's follow the best guidelines that are out there, keeping track of what CDC and Knox County was saying. And so we went back with masked up, separating kids, sometimes by groups in schools when school year reinstated, but kind of the 6 feet apart. And we tried virtually, and that was okay, but it really doesn't replace the face-to-face interaction that kids really need. Even in our school systems, we saw just, they may academically have progressed, but socially they hadn't. And so we knew that, man, we've got to get kids back together. They need relationship, they need contact. So we just kind of pivoted and followed whatever best guidelines and practices were kind of being given at that time, which it seemed like it changed on the daily. So we just had to be willing to do whatever it takes, kind of our mantra and our motto of, hey, reaching kids and supporting them, they need us now more than ever, so let's do whatever it takes. And that was kind of still how we operate. One of the biggest things that came out of COVID in 2020 was us recognizing partners that were willing to also do whatever it takes. For instance, the Boys and Girls Club, they didn't close down in the month of April. They served the kids of essential workers. So as people were having to go to UT and Fort Sanders and work in the hospitals, they were able to serve those kids so those families could continue to work and serve our community. And when we saw that, we really allocated our partnerships to really double down with those type of people, with those types of organizations. Hey, if they're willing to figure it out and serve those who need us most, that's who we want to be working with. And that's where a lot of our growth has come, is kind of identifying those key partners that will do that will really serve our community no matter what. You know, not afraid, not also throwing caution to the wind, but willing to serve our community where they need us. Our opportunity to serve kids from under-resourced and underserved communities will continue to take priority for us. Where we're seeing that shift a little bit is where there has been a lot of focus on the center city of Knoxville. We're seeing that the access to good programming is really a blight in our rural communities now. They don't have the opportunity to get mental health, even physical health treatment, the way that our urban communities do now. Same with good youth programming. We're seeing the needs are greater in the outlying communities around us, and thus our growth. Our last 4 communities that we added were in Anderson County. Our next one's in Loudon. We continually have people ask from surrounding counties, hey, how can we bring a good program that will serve our kids here? Because poverty is poverty, and the outcomes oftentimes of just a struggle and traumatic events are the same. And so really kids just need more support, need more caring adults in their lives. So that would be really the only pivot I would see for us as an organization that has Knoxville Inner City in its name, is how do we serve kids that need us most? While we will be true to owning the urban community and the call that we have here to that piece of the puzzle, we really believe that kids across East Tennessee need good programming as well. And in addition to that, there's a few gaps that we've identified, particularly within the foster community. There are foster kids that oftentimes fall through the cracks, both of bouncing around from school to school, but also in social services. Right now we've started a new initiative called 2911 with a young man who came up through the foster care system and was adopted as a teenager. Leonard's got his head on his shoulders as a young adult in a way that he really shouldn't because of his story, but he has a heart and passion to go back and to serve kids that were just like him, to create a community among the teens in foster care so they know they're not alone, that they have belonging, and that they can have someone to know that they're just walking with them who get it. And so I don't think Leonard needs to start a new nonprofit. I don't think East Tennessee needs another one of those, but he just needs to come up underneath an organization that will give him support and that will provide him some guidance and some leadership into that. And so that's what we've stepped into with him, because again, that's a gap where that particular community of kids in foster care, I can tell you the statistics of where those kids will end up if there's not someone that is walking with them when they age out. And it's not good. It's not what our community wants and needs, but we need to intervene now before it's too late for those young people to find community and connection and support. So that's kind of a little bit of an area where we're looking to shift and pivot to kind of fill gaps, but not really create anything on our own, but support those who have the call to go back and do that because that's where they've come from. It hasn't really impacted us as much. COVID didn't really impact our volunteer numbers. We had a few volunteers that I think were a little more apprehensive based on their age or maybe just their family history and what they were a little apprehensive to come back and engage with. But even our partnerships with, for instance, the College of Nursing at UT, they continue to come weekly with about 16 to 18 volunteers serving with us. And so what they looked like was a little different with a mask at times until that gradually was lifted. But even our older retirees, they continue to volunteer. They continue to come and take precautions in the early days. But we average about 75 to 80 volunteers each semester serving in our different programs, and really we couldn't do what we do without our volunteers. So we were glad that they were on board with us to come back and serve the kids. So grateful that it hasn't really impacted us as much. I think in any nonprofit, the day-to-day looks different every single day. And even though I may be the executive director, what does that mean? That means I may be cleaning toilets one day and shaking hands with the mayor the next. It's just whatever you got to do to keep the organization running. And for our staff, our sidewalk team, that looks different on the front end of their week. They will be going into communities and preparing for the rest of the week's lessons. So they'll be going in a morning while kids are still in school and preparing lessons, pulling props, getting games ready, treats on their vans and trucks. But then that afternoon, in Monday and Tuesday, it's a very heavy visitation day. So they're going door to door, community to community, and building those relationships. And then the last 3 to 4 days in their week will look like programming. As soon as kids get out of school, they'll be at that particular location that they are every Tuesday and every Wednesday and every Thursday and so forth. And so they show up and run those exciting programs for the kids. Just a high quality program with our partners. And that's pretty much what our sidewalk team looks like. The youth is a little different. When you're working with middle school and high schoolers, they love a lot more of that small group, one-on-one time. So a lot of our volunteers and staff are spending time with them in smaller groups, just going to the movies downtown, hanging out and taking them to a Starbucks. And so that contact work, as we call it, is really the relationship deepening to when they come together and have the programming that they're a part of, that material that they're discussing, the real life talks, are just more effective because the relationship equity is there. So that looks a little bit different with those age groups, and so it's fun to see how they each can pivot and serve those age groups differently, but they do it really, really well. And most of our staff is all bought in, so even on their off days, they're still hanging out with students, they're still investing in families, and it's really rewarding to see. I think some of my favorite stories are seeing our kids who have grown up with us, and their story and some of the difficulties they faced. There was a young girl who grew up in Walter P. named Shadia, and there was a period in her life we had followed her from a kind of different apartment complex because some of our families are transitory and end up in different neighborhoods, but we're still serving those as well. But there was a point in Shadia's life where we ran into her after not having seen her for a number of weeks, and that staff member had been looking for her on visitation, and just the apartment was empty. And she told that staff member, she said, "Hey, we're doing okay. we're staying at some friend's house, and come to find out when she said staying at a friend's house, that meant they were sleeping in a tent in their backyard, and this was the dead of winter. And my staff member looked at her and said, Shadia, this is not okay. This is not all right. And so we helped them get an apartment, but then that didn't stop Shadia from continuing to go through tough times. I remember her senior year, she was at Austin East, a 4.0 student, amazing young lady, an avid reader, a violinist, I mean, just a phenomenal young woman. But then her aunt, who had raised her as a mom, ended up in just some situations that removed her from Shadia's life, unfortunately. And here Shadia was in the final semester of her senior year with the wind just taken out of her sails. It caught her off guard. She missed a few buses that she needed to catch to go to school, and when we started hearing about that, we knew we had to step in, help Shadia, support her, remind her that, hey, even in these down moments, she's not alone. And we got her through that semester, but what was so fun was that one of our volunteers met us at Target in Turkey Creek, bought everything Shadia needed to move into Berea to go to college, everything she needed for her dorm. My wife and I got to drive up there and move her in, and she got to fulfill what her passion was, which was to eventually go overseas and have a semester to study abroad. She loved anime, and she got to go to Japan, and in Tokyo had a semester abroad while she was at Berea on a full ride scholarship because of her service learning, which she had done with us in our youth program. She had learned that she loved to serve under the bridge with the homeless. She went up there and read to grandparents, got a full ride because of that, but got to experience all these things that she had only dreamed about. And then during that work study program, she's now graduated, but she worked in the president's office and has now been hired full-time as an assistant to the president at Berea in Kentucky, which is just phenomenal. To come from Walter P., to be able to study abroad, and to now work in the president's office of a university or college. Just neat to see them overcome those obstacles and challenges, which you know weren't easy, but just a lot of people there to help hold up your arms when you need it the most. And so she's one of those that just kind of depicts so many of the kids that are diamonds in the rough that just need a little extra support and encouragement along the way. You know, as you mentioned, you hadn't heard of KICKO before, and I think a lot of people that I encounter in other areas of the city have never heard of KICKO, and I just encourage them to learn more about us, to come and actually see what we do in person. Where we're well known is where we serve 7 days a week in our urban communities and now into some of our rural neighborhoods as well. But we've not advertised ourselves or spent a lot on marketing, maybe to our own detriment, but man, we would love for people to be exposed to some of the good that's happening in our communities. And for us, it's been the last 28 years. So this isn't a pop-up or a fly-by-night, but we would love for more people to kind of come and check out what is happening through organizations in our center city. Like KICKO, and we're just one of probably among many that have been faithful to do good work to really help support some of our young people. So yeah, I just would love more folks to kind of get connected and see visually what we do. Yeah, anyone who either wants to participate in our programming as someone attending or someone volunteering, they can go to our website, and that's kicko.org, KICKO.org.